Hey guys, okay, so we're done chapter 9. We're going to get started on chapter 10. Couple things before we get started. First, the majority of the next few chapters, 11, 12, and so on and so forth, we're going to be dealing with Keynesianism. So a lot of what we're going to talk about going forward is going to be driven by Keynesian economics. This is an introduction to Keynesian economics. The main thing to note here is what I'm going to show you in these notes, which is only a page or so. That's on Keynesianism. So when you take a look at those notes that are posted on Moodle, just take a look at they're going to be the key issues, and I'm just going to go over them now. I'm just warning you that because there's like 50 or so slides in this chapter, and we're not covering all of that. We're just going to kind of introduce you to the top of Keynesianism, what they would say back to the self-regulators. And as I said, the majority of the rest of the class is going to be driven by Keynesian economics. So there's no reason to devote too much time right now, especially given constraints like the fact that my camera is dying on me every 5-10 minutes. So let's get started. First things first, I encourage you to read about the consumption function, but we are not going to cover it. So I definitely think it's good to discuss, and it's good to read, but we're not going to cover it in this chapter. Okay. First things first, I want to introduce you to John Maynard Keynes. He lived in the late 1800s through the Great Depression, and I'm going to be looking more at my notes than up here, but basically he argued that the private sector decisions sometimes lead to inefficient macroeconomic outcomes, which require active policy responses by the government, particularly monetary actions by the central bank, aka the Fed, and fiscal policy interactions by Congress and the President to stabilize output over the business cycle. Keynes' view on Say's law. According to Keynes, a decrease in the consumption and subsequent increase in savings may not be matched by an equal increase in investment. This is important for the sake of our quiz. So this part that I'm using from my notes that I don't know if it's noted here. Yes, here we go. A decrease in the consumption and subsequent increase in savings may not be matched by an equal increase in investment. Thus, a decrease in total expenditure may occur. That's important for the sake of our quiz. Basically, Keynes is saying, no, Say's law doesn't always hold. He's assuming that that increase in savings will always be matched by an increase in investment. And Keynes is saying that's not always the case. Keynes also talked about the fact that economy can get stuck in a recessionary gap. Hold on just a second. Well, they go on to talk about savings and interest rates here. Well, Keynes differed from self-regulators in that he thought that savers may not save more at higher interest rates or save less at lower interest rates. He felt like if they have a specific goal in mind, they may save less at higher interest rates just to meet that goal. So Keynes really thought that saving is more responsive to changes in incomes than to changes in interest rates, where Say's law didn't necessarily agree with that. That's something to note for the sake of our quiz. Keynes thought that prices and wages may be down. I'm skipping down in my notes here. Keynes thought that prices and wages may be inflexible downward. Here they talk about the labor market may adjust slowly. In particular, a lowered demand for labor may not be met with a declining wage rate. Wage rates might be inflexible downward. In other words, he's arguing here that wages are sticky. So he's kind of the originator of this thought that wages are inflexible downward. In other words, your boss is really not very likely to come into you during a recession and say, we're going to cut your wages. Generally, you'd have a firing or they wouldn't do that. Keynes is saying. Say's law said that give them time, they will. Also, Keynes said that, like I was going to say earlier, that an economy can get stuck in a recessionary gap. So if you're at this point in a recessionary gap, you can get stuck there. He said that wages could be sticky or inflexible, which would not allow that short-run aggregate supply curve, like Say's law and the classical economists said that this short-run aggregate supply curve would shift to the right until you met 2 if you just gave it time, because wages would adjust. Keynes is saying that that would not be the case. So he basically argued that the labor market had inflexible wages downward. Basically, I think that I want to keep moving along here, but a lot of the differences between Say's law or classical economists, or if you want to call them self-regulators, and Keynes or Keynesian economists is in result of how long it takes wages to fall. Does that happen in the short run? If that's the case, the self-regulators are probably right. If it only happens in the long run, then maybe Keynes is right. And what exactly is the definition between short run and long run? And we haven't really gotten into that yet. But that's definitely a debating point between the two of them as well. I also mentioned to you that we're skipping the consumption function, which would, if we continued with these slides, I'm sure we would get into. The only other thing I'm going to skip through some of these slides until I find it, that I think is really notable from this chapter, is Keynes's model. So I'm looking for that, so just bear with me for a second. Here's the consumption function. As I said, it's good to read through, but it's not necessary for what we're looking for. I can talk to you guys about that next class. Here we go. Okay, so the Keynesian model has a normal aggregate demand curve. It's a typical aggregate demand curve, downward sloping aggregate demand curve. The weird thing about the Keynesian model is they're going to have this supply curve like this. So the aggregate supply curve is horizontal until you reach Qn, and that's when it turns into a vertical curve. So it's kind of like this is the long run aggregate supply curve, but it only stops until here. Because of this, changes in aggregate demand in the horizontal section won't change the price level. So if you change from here to here, for example, the price level is not increasing at all. But in the horizontal section, once you're up here, that's all they're going to increase is the price level. Keynes basically said that the private sector can't remove the economy from the recessionary gap in certain cases. Keynes believed in some cases it just could not. No matter how low interest rates fell, investment spending would not rise because of pessimism. As a result of this simple economy, Keynes says the government may need to help and step in because the economy can be in equilibrium and in recessionary gap at once. So I'm going to end this here. I know this was pretty quick going through Keynesianism via the slides, but what I'm going to recommend you do is you take some time to read through these notes on chapter 8 and 9, and if you know these notes, you should be fine for the quiz. Also, you're going to need to know the PowerPoint presentation for chapter 8. So know chapter 8, and then go through the notes that I'm going to supply on Moodle for chapter 9 and 10. And after having watched these lecture sessions as well, I think you should be fine for the quiz next week. If you have any questions throughout the week, shoot me an email. We'll go from there. I'm sorry about class being canceled, but it is what it is. The rain happened. So we'll see you next time.